Noma, Lerato, and Naledi were three friends from the same village. They had grown up together, sharing dreams of a brighter future. When they all got accepted into the same university in the city, it felt like a dream come true. However, their parents struggled to afford their living expenses in the city. The girls knew they had to work hard to make ends meet. Noma was always studying. She had to work very hard to keep up with her courses, spending countless hours in the library and poring over her textbooks late into the night. Her determination was unwavering, even though it meant she barely had time for anything else. Lerato, on the other hand, was naturally clever. She had a knack for picking up information quickly during lectures and didn't need to put in as much effort as Noma. The only problem was that Lerato loved going to parties. Despite her late nights out, she still managed to pass her exams with ease. Naledi was average in her studies. She worked hard but often found herself struggling to keep up. Unlike Lerato, she didn't have a natural talent for academics. She was more carefree, often getting caught up in the excitement of city life. Noma was a Christian and would often go to church during her free time, seeking solace and strength in her faith. Meanwhile, Lerato and Naledi spent their free nights at clubs, dancing and having fun. They would come back in the early morning with new bags, dresses, and sometimes even money. Noma couldn't understand how they always had new things. "You need to start going with us, Noma," Lerato said one evening. "Look at you. You always have the same clothes. You don't have to keep going to church or study all the time. We're still young. We need to enjoy life because once we start working, we'll have to support our families." Noma felt a pang of envy and confusion. She wanted to fit in and have fun like her friends, but she also didn't want to compromise her studies or her values. The struggle between her desire to belong and her commitment to her future created an internal conflict that left her feeling torn. Despite the pressure from her friends, Noma continued to focus on her studies. But the allure of the nightlife and the promise of new experiences tugged at her heart, leaving her wondering if she was missing out on something important. The tension between her and her friends grew, and Noma knew she had to make a decision that would shape her future. One evening, at one of the many parties Lerato attended, she caught the eye of an older man named Tony. He was a rich businessman in his late 40s, tall with ebony skin that gleamed under the club lights. Tony carried 3 phones with him, always busy and making calls. He took an immediate interest in Lerato, showering her with attention and gifts. Tony began buying Lerato clothes, bags, and shoes, sometimes whisking her away for entire weekends, leaving Noma and Naledi behind in their small apartment. Noma, focused on her studies, would spend her time in the library, while Naledi sometimes joined her at church when Lerato was away. Despite their different paths, the 3 girls remained close, sharing their experiences and supporting each other. Lerato would return from her weekends with Tony, her arms laden with groceries, and sometimes a dress or 2 for her friends. "Here, Noma, I got you this," she would say, handing over a beautifully packaged dress. "I hope it fits." The generosity made their lives a bit easier, and they no longer had to worry about their daily needs. Tony never invited Lerato to his house. Their meetings were always at clubs, fancy restaurants, or luxurious holiday destinations. Lerato enjoyed the thrill of the nightlife, the excitement of the city, and the attention Tony lavished on her. She was unaware that Tony was married with 2 children who lived in the UK with his wife. The distance made it easy for Tony to lead a double life, and Lerato remained blissfully ignorant of his secrets. For Lerato, Tony was a blesser, a benefactor who provided for her and her roommates. They no longer struggled as much to make ends meet, and Lerato reveled in the newfound luxury. Noma, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She worried about Lerato's choices and the potential consequences of her relationship with Tony. As time went on, the conflict between their different lifestyles grew more apparent. Noma continued to focus on her studies and her faith, while Lerato's life became more entwined with Tony's world of wealth and excess. Naledi found herself caught in the middle, torn between the allure of Lerato's glamorous life and the stability and peace she found with Noma at church. The tension between the friends simmered beneath the surface, and Noma couldn't help but wonder if the choices they were making would ultimately lead to a reckoning that none of them could foresee. The path they were on was fraught with uncertainty, and the future held both promise and peril. One day, during midterm break, Tony invited Lerato and her friends to a lavish party. Excited, Lerato managed to convince Noma and Nandi to join her, even though they were skeptical and had made excuses to their parents not to go home. The path they were on was fraught with uncertainty, and the future held both promise and peril. Nandi tried to calm both of them down, urging them to enjoy the party. Noma, feeling overwhelmed, excused herself to go to the ladies' room. Nandi followed to comfort her, while Lerato stayed behind, seething with anger. She glanced at the drinks, a devious thought crossing her mind. "Now let's see how you'll refuse," she muttered to herself. "At least one of you girls will make money, and I'll get my percentage." Noma waited impatiently. In the ladies' toilet, her stomach upset and took longer than usual in the ladies. Meanwhile, Nandi returned to the table and sipped her drink, unaware of Lerato's actions. "Where's Noma?" Lerato asked when she finally returned. "She's still in there," Nandi replied, sipping her drink. Little did they know, Noma had taken an Uber back to their apartment. On the way, feeling increasingly unwell, she asked the driver to redirect to the nearest hospital. "Are you okay?" the concerned driver asked, but Noma couldn't respond. By the time they reached the hospital, Noma was in severe pain. As she got out of the car, she collapsed, and the nurses rushed to her with a stretcher, admitting her immediately. The night that began with promises of excitement and luxury quickly turned into a harrowing experience, leaving Noma's friends unaware of the true extent of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of their newfound lifestyle. Tony glanced around the room, his eyes narrowing. "Where is your friend?" he asked Lerato, his voice tinged with impatience. "I thought you said she was in the ladies' room." Lerato, feeling uneasy, turned to Nandi. "Go and check on her," she said. The drinks were beginning to take their toll on Nandi, and she was acting strange, her movements sluggish. After a moment's hesitation, Lerato decided to check on Noma herself. As she pushed open the door to the ladies' room, her heart sank. Noma was nowhere to be found. "She's gone," Lerato said, returning to the table with a mix of worry and anger. Tony's friend, eyeing Nandi, shrugged. "I guess she will do," he said, his gaze lingering on Nandi, who was now acting odd and kept smiling for no reason. Tony and Lerato left the party, while Nandi, unaware of the events unfolding around her, left with a short, brown man. Both girls went their separate ways, Nandi in a daze, and Lerato filled with anticipation and excitement as she had never been to Tony's house before. "Let's continue the party at my house," Tony suggested. Lerato's excitement grew as they drove to his home. They arrived at a huge mansion with glass windows overlooking the seaside. Lerato's eyes widened as she took in the grandeur of the place, her heart racing with excitement. She imagined herself as Tony's woman, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment that he had brought her to his home. The house had 3 floors, the basement, which was rarely entered, the top floor, and the second floor. When they parked in the garage, they could enter the house directly from there. The driveway was long and winding, leading up from a large gate that hinted at the mansion's seclusion and opulence. Tony led Lerato inside, showing her around the lavishly decorated rooms. The opulence was overwhelming, with luxurious furnishings, intricate artwork, and the soft glow of ambient lighting creating an atmosphere of elegance and comfort. They moved through the house, Tony explaining the various features, but Lerato's mind was swirling with thoughts of their future together. As the night wore on, Lerato began to feel a strange unease. The grandeur of the mansion couldn't completely mask the emptiness that seemed to linger in the air. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that beneath the surface of luxury and privilege, there were secrets waiting to be uncovered. Back at the hospital, Noma lay unconscious, the nurses working tirelessly to stabilize her condition. The events of the night had set off a chain reaction that none of the girls could foresee, leaving them entangled in a web of mystery, deception, and unexpected consequences. The story was far from over, and the choices they had made would continue to shape their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The hospital staff struggled to gather more information about Noma's condition. The only details they had were from the Uber driver who had brought her in. He explained that she had fallen ill during the ride and collapsed upon arrival at the hospital. Beyond that, there was little they could discern about what had led to her sudden and severe illness. As the night wore on, Noma's condition turned for the worse. Her breathing became shallow, and her pulse grew weak. The doctors and nurses were baffled, unable to determine the cause of her rapid decline. They conducted tests and scans, but the results were inconclusive. Back at the party, Nandi found herself in a vulnerable position, unaware of the events unfolding around her. The short, round man who had taken an interest in her led her away, and she stumbled along, her mind clouded by the tampered drinks. The choices they had made that night were setting off a chain reaction, entangling all three friends in a web of mystery, deception, and unexpected consequences. As Noma lay in the hospital bed, her mind drifted in and out of consciousness. Her dreams were filled with flashes of the night's events, distorted and fragmented. She saw the faces of her friends, the strangers at the party, and a looming darkness that seemed to reach out for her. The doctors continued their efforts, but Noma's condition showed no signs of improvement. The hospital room was filled with the hum of machines and the hushed voices of the medical staff. The air was heavy with a sense of urgency and dread. The events of the night had set into motion a series of events that none of the girls could have foreseen. The choices they had made would continue to shape their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The story was far from over, and the shadows of their actions would follow them, weaving a complex tapestry of consequences that would forever alter their paths. As Noma's life hung in the balance, the threads of their intertwined fates tightened, drawing them deeper into the web of intrigue and uncertainty. The mystery of what had happened that night would unravel slowly, with each revelation bringing new challenges and unforeseen dangers. The night felt carefree, and Lerato found herself sipping her drink and relaxing, lost in the excitement of the moment. She felt lightheaded, and before she knew it, she was being led to a cozy room in Tony's mansion to sleep. Tony didn't touch Lerato. He ensured she was comfortable before leaving her to rest in a separate room. The following morning, Lerato woke up feeling slightly disoriented. She stretched and rubbed her eyes before making her way downstairs. As she descended the grand staircase, she was greeted by the sight of a woman dressed in a maid's uniform. "Good morning," the maid said with a polite smile. "Breakfast is served in the dining room. Mr. Tony asked me to tell you he has a meeting to attend and that you should make yourself at home. He will be back soon." Lerato nodded, her thoughts still hazy from the night before. She made her way to the dining room, where an array of delicious breakfast items awaited her. She sat down and began to eat, savoring the flavors while her mind wandered. After finishing breakfast, Lerato returned to her room. She couldn't bring herself to ask the maid any questions, feeling a sense of unease that she couldn't quite shake off. Instead, she kept to herself, replaying the events of the previous night in her mind. The opulence of the mansion, the kindness of Tony, and the strange sense of being in a place she didn't fully understand all weighed heavily on her. As she sat in her room, her thoughts turned to her friends, wondering how Noma and Nandi were doing and what their night had been like. Little did she know that the choices they had made that night were setting off a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences, entangling them in a web of mystery and uncertainty. By the time they knew it, Lerato had become Tony's official girlfriend. She felt more relaxed, basking in the luxurious lifestyle that came with being associated with a wealthy businessman. Tony treated her well, showering her with gifts and attention. One day, Tony returned with a brand new iPhone for Lerato. She was thrilled and immediately started setting it up. However, Tony took her old phone, slipping it into his pocket. Lerato noticed and asked, "Tony, what about my old phone? Why did you take it?" Tony smiled, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Lerato, you don't need that old phone anymore. You're with me now, and you have to keep up and behave like the rich people do. Consider it a part of your new life." Lerato felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. On one hand, she loved the idea of living a lavish life without the struggles she had faced before. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing a part of herself in the process. The new phone symbolized a new chapter, but it also meant leaving behind the simplicity of her past. As days went by, Lerato embraced her role as Tony's girlfriend, enjoying the perks and privileges that came with it. She no longer worried about money or daily necessities. Her wardrobe expanded with designer clothes, and she attended high-end events and parties, mingling with influential people. Despite the glamour, there were moments when Lerato missed the simpler times with her friends, Noma and Nandi. She wasn't attending lectures anymore. She wondered how they were faring and whether they would understand the choices she had made. The gap between their lives seemed to widen with each passing day, and Lerato couldn't help but feel a twinge of longing for the days when things were less complicated. On the other hand, Naledi woke up to a shocking realization. The short, round man from the party was lying on the bed beside her. Panic surged through her as she sat up abruptly, her heart pounding in her chest. "What am I doing here? Why am I here?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger and confusion. The man mumbled something incoherent, but Naledi didn't wait to hear more. She quickly got up, dressed, and stormed out of the room. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, fear, and a desperate need for answers. She felt violated and betrayed, unsure of how she had ended up in such a situation. Naledi hurried back to the apartment, her thoughts racing. She needed an explanation, but she couldn't do much without her friends. She tried calling Lerato, but her phone was unavailable. She then tried Noma's phone, but it was off. Frustration and helplessness washed over her as she realized she was alone in this moment of crisis. The apartment was eerily quiet, and Naledi felt a sense of isolation creeping in. She paced the room, her mind replaying the events of the night, trying to piece together what had happened. The absence of her friends only heightened her anxiety, leaving her with a gnawing sense of dread. Naledi knew she needed to confront Lerato and find out what had transpired. The choices they had made that night were beginning to unravel, and the consequences were becoming all too real. As she waited for her friends to return, Naledi couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change in ways they could never have imagined. The web of mystery and deception they were entangled in was growing tighter, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Noma was slowly beginning to regain consciousness. The doctors had worked tirelessly to stabilize her, and their efforts were finally paying off. After running several tests, they discovered that Noma had food poisoning and had eaten something she was severely allergic to. The realization brought a sense of relief, knowing they could now treat her properly. As Noma's eyes fluttered open, she felt weak but grateful to be alive. She saw the concerned faces of the nurses around her and managed to whisper, "Can you call Naledi for me?" One of the nurses nodded and promptly dialed Naledi's number. At that moment, Naledi was sitting in class, trying to focus on the lecture but still troubled by the events of the previous night. After class, she saw the missed call and a voicemail notification. Curious, she listened to the message, her eyes widening with shock. "Noma is in the hospital? What? Why? Now?" she exclaimed, her heart pounding with worry. Without wasting another moment, Naledi grabbed her bag and rushed to the hospital. As she entered the hospital, Naledi's mind raced with questions and concerns. She navigated the hallways, her thoughts consumed with worry for her friend. Finally, she reached Noma's room, and the sight of her friend lying in the hospital bed brought tears to her eyes. "Noma, I'm here," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "What happened?" Noma, still weak but grateful for her friend's presence, managed a small smile. "I'm glad you're here, Naledi. The doctor said it was food poisoning, and I had an allergic reaction to something I ate." Naledi nodded, her worry mingling with relief. "We'll get through this, Noma. I'm here for you." "But where is Lerato?" she asked. "I have no idea," Noma said. As the two friends embraced, the weight of the night's events began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and determination. The bond between them grew stronger as they faced the challenges ahead with courage and unwavering support for one another. Lerato, on the other hand, was living a life of luxury. One night, Tony surprised her with exciting news. "I have a surprise for you, Lerato. We'll be going on holiday to Dubai," he announced with a smile. Lerato's eyes lit up with joy and excitement. She had never been overseas, and the idea of traveling to such an exotic and glamorous destination filled her with anticipation. As they boarded the plane and flew to Dubai, Lerato couldn't contain her excitement. The thought of exploring a new country, shopping for designer clothes, and experiencing the luxurious lifestyle Tony had introduced her to was a dream come true. Upon arriving in Dubai, the opulence of the city amazed her. Skyscrapers touched the clouds, and the city buzzed with energy and wealth. While Tony attended his business meetings, Lerato spent her days indulging in shopping sprees. Designer clothing, high-end accessories, and lavish boutiques were now within her reach. Money was no issue, and she relished the freedom to buy whatever caught her eye. Her days were filled with luxury, and she felt on top of the world. However, Lerato was unaware of the true reasons behind their trip to Dubai. Tony's business dealings were shrouded in secrecy, and there were aspects of his life and work that he had kept hidden from her. She enjoyed the lavish lifestyle and the gifts Tony showered upon her, but beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of mystery and intrigue that she had yet to uncover. It wasn't until she reached into her bag and realized she had forgotten to keep some money for herself that she felt a twinge of worry. Just then, her phone rang. It was Tony. "Lerato, hope you're okay and enjoying your shopping," he said warmly. "Don't forget to get a nice dress for dinner. I'll send a driver to pick you up and take you to the restaurant." Lerato's excitement soared, and she immediately dismissed her earlier concern. Later that evening, the driver arrived at the hotel to pick her up. As she settled into the back seat, she felt a sense of specialness, convinced that this evening would bring a proposal. However, as the car journeyed on, Lerato noticed they weren't heading towards any familiar restaurant. Instead, they drove further from the hotel, and soon, a huge mansion loomed ahead, far from the bustling city center. Confusion mixed with excitement as she wondered what Tony had planned. Upon arrival, a woman elegantly dressed as a maid greeted her with a glass of champagne. She smiled warmly and led Lerato to a lavish lounge. "Please make yourself comfortable," she said, gesturing to a plush sofa. As Lerato sipped the champagne, she felt a sense of luxury and anticipation. The maid then handed Lerato a non-disclosure form to sign. Lerato glanced at it briefly, her mind racing with thoughts of a potential proposal and the excitement of her new life with Tony. Assuming it was a prenup, she signed the document without much thought. As she waited for Tony to arrive, a sense of unease began to creep in. The grandeur of the mansion was overwhelming, and the mystery of the evening left her with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Little did she know, this night would mark a turning point in her life, unveiling secrets and challenges she had yet to face. The path she had chosen was filled with unexpected twists, and the choices she made would continue to shape her future in ways she could never have imagined. While Lerato was in Dubai enjoying her luxurious lifestyle, Noma and Naledi spent time together, growing closer in the aftermath of their recent experiences. Noma had fully recovered and was back at university, focusing on her studies once more. The bond between the two friends deepened as they supported each other through the challenges they faced. One evening, as they sat in their apartment, Naledi reflected on the events of that fateful night. "You know, Noma, I think the drink that night was meant for you," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "It's clear now that the friend we knew from childhood has changed. All because of money." Noma nodded, her expression somber. "It's hard to believe how much Lerato has changed. I never thought she'd put us in such a difficult position." Meanwhile, back in the village, Lerato's parents grew increasingly worried. They hadn't heard from their daughter in a while and sensed that something was amiss. They called Noma and Naledi, desperate for any information about their daughter's whereabouts. "Hello, Naledi," Lerato's mother said, her voice filled with concern. "We haven't heard from Lerato in days. Is she okay? We're really worried." Naledi exchanged a worried glance with Noma before answering. "Yes, Auntie, she's fine," she lied, trying to sound reassuring. "She's just been very busy with her studies and some new opportunities. Don't worry, we'll make sure she calls you soon." After ending the conversation, Naledi sighed in frustration. "Look how this girl has put us in a difficult position," she said, annoyed. "Where is she anyway?" Noma frowned, her worry evident. "I'm really concerned. She's missed a lot of classes. I mean, we all know she's clever, but this is irresponsible. And now we have to lie to her parents." A night that had started with excitement and anticipation had turned into a nightmare, leaving her feeling trapped and powerless. After Lerato signed the document, this is when Lerato was blindfolded by the maid. "Don't panic," she said. "Mr. Tony is waiting somewhere else. He wants it to be a surprise," she said. When she heard the name, Tony, she felt relieved. Lerato found herself yachting with strangers, without the person who had brought her there. She begins to get worried, then she is approached by this old man. "I'm sure you asking yourself, where is your friend Tony?" One man said, smoking a cigar looking at me. "He won't be coming to join us. This is just a business transaction." Lerato began to panic and started crying, pleading, "Please let me go." The man said to you have signed for non-disclosure, and whatever happens today is what you have agreed on. So meet my other business partners and their sons. As I looked at these men and their fat bellies, I cried, "Let me go, please." Their sons looked at me, and their faces were excited. The more I cried, the more it seemed like a game for the father and sons. These men had no sympathy at all. Just when she thought it was over, they took turns to humiliate her further. She was forced to even eat poop from these men. The room smelt bad. The more I threw up, it was fun for them, like a game, a very sick game. This felt like a ritual which she hated. The night felt long. She was forced to endure their degrading actions, and the more she resisted, the more they seemed to enjoy it. Her mind kept drifting back to Tony, the man she had trusted. She wanted to ask him so many questions, but she was alone with these men and their sons. By the time she knew it, it was the early hours of the morning. She had no idea what had happened, but when she woke up the following day, she found herself lying on the bed in her hotel room. Her passport and clothes were intact, and there was an envelope with money beside her. Tony was nowhere to be found. Lerato had all the money, but felt utterly disgusted. The designer clothes that once brought joy now seemed meaningless. She had so many questions for Tony, who was nowhere to be found. She called his phone repeatedly, but there was no answer. A wave of self-loathing washed over her. Every single part of her body felt tainted. No matter how much she tried to clean herself, the smell and the filth clung to her. She scrubbed herself so hard that her skin began to bleed. Each time she closed her eyes, flashes of the nightmarish events replayed in her mind. She was at her breaking point. Lerato thought of her simple life as a student, striving to build a future back home. She didn't have much, but she was happy with her two friends, Noma and Naledi. Guilt consumed her as she realized the betrayal of her own values and the damage caused by her selfishness. Desperately needing to escape, Lerato quickly dressed and called an Uber to take her to the airport. She couldn't bear to stay in Dubai any longer. As she sat in the back seat of the car, her mind raced with thoughts of the night before and the profound sense of betrayal. She was determined to find a seat on the next available plane. All she wanted was to be back home. I cried the whole night and didn't care people were looking at me. I just wanted to get home. I finally landed back home and felt a sense of relief washing over me. The experience had left mentally and emotionally scarred. The luxury and excitement she had once enjoyed now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of the choices she had made and the consequences she had faced. The path ahead was uncertain, and Lerato knew she had a long journey of healing and self-discovery ahead of her. She took an Uber to the apartment. When she arrived, Noma and Naledi were shocked to see her. As she hugged them, tears streaming down her face, the anger the two women had for Lerato melted away. She sat all night in tears, her hands trembling. "What happened, Lerato?" Noma asked, concern etched on her face. "Where have you been?" Naledi added, "Your mother has been worried about you." Lerato just sat there, crying for 3 days without a word. She held the sheets, as if she was seeing a ghost. Noma and Naledi were confused and didn't know what to do. They watched helplessly as Lerato struggled with her emotions, feeling the weight of her pain and trauma. Seeing Lerato in such a state broke their hearts. They wanted to help her, to offer comfort and support, but they didn't know how. They stayed by her side, hoping that their presence would provide some solace. Slowly, they began to piece together the fragments of Lerato's experience, understanding the depth of her suffering. As the days passed, they continued to be there for her, offering quiet encouragement and a safe space for her to heal. The bond between the three friends grew stronger as they faced this difficult time together. They knew the road to recovery would be long, but they were determined to support Lerato every step of the way. Eventually, Lerato began to speak, sharing bits and pieces of her harrowing experience with Noma and Naledi. The trauma she had endured left deep scars, and she struggled to find the words to describe the pain and betrayal she felt. Her nights were filled with screams and tears, and sometimes she would talk to herself, lost in the memories of what had happened. Realizing that Lerato needed professional help, Noma and Naledi encouraged her to seek treatment at a hospital. Lerato agreed, understanding that she needed to go through a healing process to reclaim her life. She was admitted to the hospital, where she stayed for 3 months, undergoing intensive therapy and recovery. During her time at the hospital, Lerato faced her demons head-on. The therapy sessions were challenging, but they provided her with the tools to cope with her trauma and begin the journey towards healing. The support of the medical staff and the safe environment of the hospital allowed her to confront her past and work through her emotions. Lerato's recovery was a slow and arduous process. There were days when she felt overwhelmed by the weight of her experiences, but she persevered, determined to rebuild her life. The love and support of Noma and Naledi were crucial in her journey, providing her with the strength to keep going. As the months passed, Lerato began to see glimpses of hope. She learned to manage her emotions and found ways to cope with her trauma. The healing process was far from over, but she was making progress, one step at a time. The path ahead was still uncertain, but Lerato faced it with newfound resilience and determination, ready to reclaim her life and move forward. She realized that money and designer clothes wasn't worth it. Thank you for watching Granny G Stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for part 2 of the story.